Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cisco Unplugged. My name is Dan Klamert, and I'm your host. And this week, on episode 33, we're going to be discussing in-service software upgrades, or ISSU. And I am very happy to welcome Mr. Chip Jenkins from Lawrence, South Carolina, to the show today. Hi, Chip. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for letting me participate in this episode.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for being here. And I know you're many times behind the scenes too, answering questions. So thanks for
Yep.
being here in front of the house today.
Yeah, I'm typically the guy out there on Slido answering all the questions that our
Yes,
audience has. And so it's going to be fun to be on this side of the equation.
agreed. Yeah, thank you very much. So before we get going, real quick, just a couple reminders here for everyone. If you do have questions, like we were just talking about, we use Slido, and you can see the Slido link either on the YouTube page below, right below the video here that we're streaming live. You can click on that to join the Slido and submit your questions there. We do many times take questions live on the show. So, and we do also have people standing by to answer those questions too if we don't have the chance to get to them. But please submit your questions. We'll try to get to those live on the show today here. And then also, we you can see I think the QR code on the screen too if you want to join that way. But these sessions are recorded as always, and on our YouTube channel, you can subscribe there at youtube.com/@SimpleGetUnplugged to be notified when we do go live with new content. If you do subscribe, you'll be notified there when we do. Like next week, when we actually have a special episode live from Cisco Live. So we will be out there. If you're out there, come say hi to us, and we'd love to see you, love to chat and connect with you out there in Las Vegas. And hopefully it's not too hot out there. But so find us out there. We'd love to talk to you and connect with you. But so that we are taking a little bit of um, a jump from our regular schedule of every other week to a live episode next week at the same time. And then we will be back then later in June, back to our usual June 26th date. So we won't have a show in 2 weeks like we usually do. So again, like I said, just if you do subscribe to the YouTube channel, you'll be notified when we do go live. But it is next week, a week from today at live. So look forward to seeing you out there. All right, enough of the housekeeping stuff, and now we'll on with the show here. Chip, take it away.
Thanks, Dan. And before I go to my first slide, I do want to quickly alert you that ISSU is a feature that's not just supported on the 9800. Of course, this is because you're talking to the wireless group here that we're going to focus strictly on the 9800, which has a uniqueness to it because we
Sure.
have access points that are tied to the 9800. But if you go on Cisco.com and you type in a search for in-service software upgrade, you're going to see multiple platforms within our portfolio that supports ISSU. So just be mindful that if you are going to do a search and you're specifically on 9800, I'd recommend putting your 9800 as part of your search. But again, ISSU is definitely a part of the iOS XE, which runs on multiple platforms within the portfolio. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of ISSU, I do want to talk about the high availability because this is certainly a component that we want to talk about when we talk about high availability. And you can see from this slide how we kind of categorize what happens with unplanned events and what are some of the features that you can implement in order to minimize any of the difficulties or the risks that you take when certain events occur. So we have a whole host of those you have, but for today's subject, we're specifically going to point to what we're talking about, a software image upgrade on the 9800, which is, again, the ISSU. And I want to highlight as part of this, and you're going to see here in a few slides, how the rolling AP upgrade is a component that we use within the ISSU on the 9800. But the rolling upgrade is not just part of ISSU. So you can actually take advantage of the rolling AP upgrade without initiating ISSU. That's why I want to make sure that we're highlighting that some of these pieces that you're going to see in our demo here, you can actually take advantage without rolling out ISSU. So let's talk about the feature matrix on what products that you can support with ISSU, because depending on how you rolled out your 9800s will determine how what you can and cannot do. So you can notice here, and I highlighted that in the yellow rectangle with ISSU. So we don't support ISSU on any of the embedded wireless LAN controllers, either on AP or a 9800 or 90, excuse me, a 9000 switch, nor do we support ISSU on a 9800 CL in a public cloud. So with, say, AWS, we don't support that feature, but there are other means by which you can, or features you can implement to help mitigate any upgrades within either one of those. So if we're talking about ISSU, just note that with the 9800 hardware base, so that's the L, the 40, and the dash 80, as well as the 9800 in a private cloud, you can implement ISSU. And so with that, if that gets confusing or you need questions, don't hesitate to reach out to your account team. And your account team can reach out and coordinate a schedule with myself or somebody on our team to help articulate what you can and can't do with the deployment that you've made. So let's talk about why ISSU. So prior to ISSU, and it was very, to do a code upgrade, it was very time consuming and you had to put a lot of thought into it. And so with ISSU, we took all of that manual process and put it into a workflow with algorithms to do a lot of checks and balances, and also specifically on the AP side of that. So we have simplified it tremendously. Now it's, you go into the GUI, initiate the upgrade, and then you let the ISSU do its thing. Prior to that, there was a lot of planning you had to do. You had to, I've done a lot of this helping customers where we'd get the spreadsheets with all of the access points. We'd figure out where their neighbors were and which AP that we could reload without impacting neighboring access points. And so it became a pretty tedious task, especially if you had a large network with literally thousands. And I've done a lot of these, especially with hospitals, where you've got an environment that runs 24/7, 365 days a week. And the odds or the ability to get a maintenance window is almost impossible to do. So ISSU was designed to help customers mitigate their risks and downtime. And you'll see here throughout this presentation where we have initiated some really neat parts of the algorithm to ensure that traffic continues to flow, and that when clients are on access points that need to be rebooted, we gracefully ask them to move over. And so you've taken all that manual process and put it into an automated process.
Hey,
So let's
Chip.
talk about what you need. Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, we already have a question here on AP types here. So someone's asking if they can use ISSU or if it's supported for their 3700 series APs, or they're asking, is that just for Wi-Fi 6 and newer APs?
Great question. Thanks for that. So ISSU is only supported on an iOS XE based controller. So that's all the 9800s.
Yep.
We're not supporting in AirOS, the code. It's not, it doesn't have the oomph to be able to do what the iOS XE does. So when we differentiate our customers that are still running on the AirOS based controllers, which the 3704 is an AirOS,
Yeah.
then it does, you're not permitted to do that. And so you have to kind of use that old school model of doing it in the manual route.
Sure.
So
So it makes sense, I guess, to
one of the
say
big
that
things
it's, oh, sorry. Yeah, so it's safe to say that if you're on the 9800, your APs are connected to your 9800, you're safe, you're good to go with ISSU, basically,
yes, and that
from an AP
becomes
perspective.
a code request. So I literally just
Yep.
did an ISSU upgrade helped a hospital system do it. And they had 2702s and 3702s in their network. So we're talking about AC wave 1 level access points. So it really becomes a matter of finding a code that supports ISSU and the access points that you have in your network.
Yep.
And so there's some balance there that you want to do. Now, I'm happy to report that today, with all of the versions that we have available, we're still supporting all the way up to AC Wave 1 access points. So that
Nice.
means that you can do an ISSU upgrade with those older access points. It would be important to note, because with this last customer, reason I got involved in this is I wanted to monitor to see how long does it take to really do with these older APs. And you have to take into account that these APs are running older processors, not as much
Mhm.
memory as you have with our latest
Sure.
AP portfolio. So it does take longer, but it is possible to use those. And that upgrade, it actually went really smoother than I thought. When you looking at something that's 10 years old and you're using a feature that's this new and go, is this really going to work? And it did. And so I was really happy with it. Now, if you'll notice in this slide there at the bottom where it talks about prerequisites,
Mhm.
you'll see that I put in there that the base image that you're using has to be ISSU capable. And we started ISSU with 17.3. Now, I want to also alert that we're doing ISSU is supported in all the major long-lived releases in there. So again, when we talk about codes and recommendations, I'm always recommending the long-lived releases. And only those customers that are doing short-lived are moving to those codes for a specific reason. Maybe it's a feature, but for those customers that are running production long-term and typically don't want to do upgrades, then my advice is always stay with a long-lived code. That means it's going to be around a while, and it's going to have a lot of maintenance releases in there to take care of any bugs that we've identified. So with that, let's go back to our prerequisites, because I do want to highlight that with ISSU, it is only supported with a stateful switchover pair of 9800s. So if you are not set up with a pair, that means you have two 9800s that are set up in stateful switchover mode, then you can't do an ISSU. And you'll see when we get to the demo how it's part of that workflow. So it only makes sense. And I'll highlight the other thing here is that it's important for your controllers to be running install mode. And if you're going, what does that mean? Then for the sake of this, I'm not going to dig deep into that, but I'll just highlight that get with your account team and they know how to get a hold of us. And we'll be glad to go in and do a deep dive on ISSU. So for the sake of this session, it's just to give you highlights, what it is, what you can expect. And then we can follow up with another meeting to do a deep dive. Also, I want to highlight how important this is. Before you do any upgrades, please go to the release notes and just read through there. So you'll see in the release notes, there's a section called Before You Upgrade. And there's a reason why Cisco does this. And this is one of the things I've loved about Cisco. I loved it before I even came to work for Cisco. As an engineer that was maintaining a large Cisco network, I love this because it gave me the opportunity to read the experience that other people have or other customers have had and what tags is experienced. And we wrap all that up and put it in the release notes. And you can see here, and I literally just did a screenshot of this and put it in this slide deck. You can see what we have in this before you upgrade. If you're doing an upgrade and you have ISSU, here are some things that you need to take into account. And so when I did this upgrade for the hospital system in Ohio, we went through this piece by piece, and it's pretty long, and just made sure that what Cisco has already identified in that workflow of ISSU, that there's not going to be any gotchas. And so it can be tedious, but it's worth doing the work up front so that you have less work to do on the backside of this. So let's talk about the ISSU process. So in this example here, we've got two controllers, 9800s, each running version 1. And again, I didn't want to put, there's a run in 17.3 and we're running to 17.6. I'm not concerned about where you start and where you end. Just note that it's whatever version it is for your network. So in this scenario, I'm just putting version 1 is what we're running on the active and what we're running in the standby. So you'll see here in the next slide when we do the quick demo that you grab the configuration, whether it's on your desktop or whether you've already done a TFTP or have a TFTP server, or you've already moved it onto the boot flash of the primary active 9800, then whatever flavor you want. Once you have the image located, then you initiate the ISSU process, the download, and that's hands-free. You're just kind of letting it do its thing. So now you'll see that the ISSU will move the code to the standby. Then it will do install that new version 2 image onto the standby and reboot it. So now the standby is running on version 2. We're still running version 1 on the active. And I'll note here that the access points are still running version 1 at this point, but then the ISSU will start pushing a pre-download of version 2 to every AP in the network that's joined a part of this pair. So you've got the standby running version 2, active running version 1, and we got a preload download on version 2. So that sets your access points to be ready to move to version 2. So the next step in this is that we have a switchover. So we take the active and we make the version 2 of this as your as the active version. So now you've got what was the active is now standby running version 1, and the active is in version 2. And by the way, your APs, even though your active controller is running version 2, your APs are still in version 1. And that's part of the secret sauce of ISSU. And again, at this point now, we're ready to do a switch on what's now the standby. So we do a reload of the standby. So now we have both the active and the standby running version 2. But your APs are still running version 1. You say, well, how's this happening? So that's part of the secret sauce of ISSU, and how the APs that are running version 1 still know that, hey, this is the version I still need to run on until I get the notification from my active controller to start rebooting to version 2. So now at this point, we initiate the rolling AP upgrade, which I highlighted again, how rolling AP upgrade is accessible to you outside of the ISSU, but it is a part of the ISSU process. And so with that, I want to real quick, before we go into deep detail about AP rolling upgrade, I just wanted to, I pulled a quick demo of ISSU in the GUI. And you see here, we picked where the transport is on the boot flash. So that's where the code is located. We select the code that we want. In this case, it's the 1706. And now once we know the code and we're ready to click on down the ISSU. And notice here, you get this AP iteration, and we're going to talk more about that in a minute. But just know that you select how many APs that you would like for ISSU to download or to reboot at any given point in time. And I'll highlight here the status. This is what's great. Now you can monitor the status, and you can notice all the way to the left, there was a show log. And I'm sorry, this is on a little loop here. But I want you to notice that there is a little log status, so you can click onto that status and get a much more ingrained understanding of what's going on within the workflow of the ISSU. Now let's talk about the rolling AP upgrade. So in this case here, you have 3 choices that you can select: 25%, 15%, or 5%. Once you make that selection, the ISSU algorithm goes in there and starts looking at neighbor information, and it starts to select from the number of APs that you have in your network in that percentage, how many APs can I reboot at any given point in time. So in this scenario here, we've got 25 access points. So if you do the math, 25 times 25%, that comes out to be a little over 6 access points. So it's constantly looking at the neighbors, and the ISSU algorithm says, what APs can I download that minimizes the impact of clients that may be on these APs that we need to reboot? And now in the next slide, I'm going to talk about what an access point does before it reboots. But just note that the algorithm says that I want to make sure that I am not asking an access point to reboot where I don't have neighboring APs to take over the responsibility of an AP that's about to go offline.
Yeah, hey
So
Chip, while you're on that subject, we have a question along that. And I think you just answered it, but just to be clear here. So the question is, what determines what APs are used for the upgrade? For example, I only picked 5%. So I think they're asking is, how is it is it deterministic? How is it determining, sorry, I can't speak, what
yeah,
APs are selected at what point in time?
and that's a great question. So again, it's taking it's assuming consuming all of the information around APs and neighbors
Yeah,
and signal to strength and how many clients are on those APs.
sure.
And
Yep.
it's literally from an algorithm handpicking the ones that are best suited to start to do that reboot.
Gotcha.
And so it's a very intense. And by the way, this was when I talked about doing this labor intensity. So, when I was doing this manually, I just picked where's the AP physically located? Are there enough
Mm,
neighbors to do it? And then I would literally handpick those. And I created a spreadsheet. So it's really tedious.
sure.
So what ISSU algorithm is doing is handpicking all of those for you. So
Okay.
it's
And then
taking on a tremendous amount of data to do this.
Okay. And then I have another question on this. So if I'm looking at these choices here and I'm a customer, is there a recommendation here as best practice or, between 15, 25, 5%? Like, how do I
Yes.
decide?
Yeah, and that's another great question. And I spend a lot of time with my customer, that the hospital system, around this, because it becomes a balance.
Yeah,
So this particular hospital did get a window that a maintenance window allowed them to go in and do the upgrade.
sure.
And what that did is it alerts and puts people on hand, on deck. So we had a
Mm,
help. They beefed up their help desk. They
mm,
brought people on site at the hospital where we were doing this, and they had engineers on site should
sure.
things go wrong.
Yeah,
So if you do 25%, that means you're rebooting, 25% of they're grouping them based on the number. So
yeah.
in this case, well, I'll do a better number. If you do 100 access points, that means
Yep.
25 of those 100 will be upgraded.
Hmm.
Excuse me. 15% it'd be 15. So you
Yeah,
notice that the more APs that we update, the less time it takes to do the upgrade.
sure.
The fewer APs that you upgrade, the longer it's going to take.
Yeah,
So with this hospital system, we decided to go with 15 to kind of hit that middle, that we don't have to wait, because we had a 4-hour window.
yep,
And that included making sure everything was back up and running and operational,
sure.
and any issues that might have happened. We wanted to give ourselves enough lead time to
Yeah.
see if there are any issues. And so 25 looked too much, 5% was not enough, so we
Hmm.
picked 15%. And so you could run some of the math, but again, what makes it hard is your AP base. So when you look at the difference from a 2700 rebooting versus say a 9136 or 9166, they were very different, the
Sure,
timing.
sure.
And so it's hard to calculate all of that. So we decided to go with the 15% and have everybody on board. And it took, once we got to the point where we were doing the AP upgrade, it took about 2 hours, and there were 844 APs. And we had a whole list of 2700s and 2800s.
Wow.
And it ended up being that was part of the easiest part of this.
Hmm.
And so again, it's a balance
Sure,
between how big is your window, how many APs you want to do, and how fast you want to do it.
sure. Makes sense. Cool. Thanks.
I will say this too: if again, if you have more questions around this subject, don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we can get on a call and do a more in-depth conversation around that subject. Again, I want to talk about rolling AP upgrades and how we do client steering. So this is an important piece of this. And I'll say when we did the hospital, we didn't get one phone call from anybody. And if you've ever worked in a hospital system, you get a nurse or you get a doctor that loses their ability to do their jobs because the wireless is down, you're going to get a phone call. And we were monitoring our clients. We had about 2,500 clients that were on this particular pair. We saw it fluctuate, which is what you expect when we're talking about a hospital system, because people are coming in and out all the time, even when it's 2 o'clock in the morning. But we never saw it fluctuate enough to indicate that we lost people to APs, because one part of the AP, the rolling AP upgrade, is an algorithm using 802.11, which is this transition request. So it's a graceful way for access points to ask clients to find a suitable another neighbor. And you never know how many clients you have, old or new. And so you're hoping that majority of them are already new enough that they can take advantage of the 802.11v protocol to gracefully find another access point. However, there is a point where you have some of these older clients, and we do send, before we reboot, a disassociation, and it's imminent. Before we do an AP upgrade, we force clients to move off the access point. Now, I will argue that even some clients, because when you're doing 802.11 Wi-Fi, clients still rule. And I have been in situations where clients just say, I'm not leaving. I don't care what you tell me.
Mhm.
And in that case, the AP is going to be reboot, and that client's going to be forced because the AP has to reboot to the new code. But for the most part, in that scenario, all the clients were gracefully moved over, and we never got a phone call. So I was blown away. I was expecting at least a couple of phone calls. And the help desk already knew about it when they were ready to say, we're doing an upgrade, be patient, it'll be back. So we were very, very excited that we can get through all of that without a single call coming in through our help desk. All right, we're wrapping things up here with the takeaways. Just to highlight, and I stressed many of these, ISSU is only available on the 9800. It's only supported with if you have a pair of 9800s in stateful switchover mode. 7.3 release is the first release where we
Hey, Chip.
support. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. On that last one, the second bullet point. So a lot of healthcare customers will, they're super focused on highly available networks, obviously. And so they'll have HA, but they'll also potentially have an N+1 controller there as well. How does that, I guess, play in this scenario?
Yeah, and that's a great question, because that is not an uncommon for these
Yeah.
customers that have they want to minimize their risk domain
Yes.
for them to have an N+1. So and by the way, this hospital had that. They had that exact configuration
Okay.
where every hospital had a stateful switchover pair
Yep.
of 9800s. In their data center, they had an N+1.
Sure.
And typically what happens if an AP loses and it can't communicate. Now, I want to keep mindful that through this ISSU process, you can think about it that the access points know it's doing an upgrade.
Mm.
And so it's waiting for that active pair, and it knows that there's things going to be moving here. And so it should never go to that N+1, and it doesn't.
Mhm.
In that
Yeah.
whole upgrade that we did, it should not go to the N+1. If you do see that, then we know that there's something has broken in the ISSU upgrade, and we need to take note and see what's happening with those APs. And so that you should never see those APs join. And by the way, with that hospital, we never saw an AP move to their N+1.
Okay.
But it is a good back, it's another layer of high availability
Yes.
that should never take play in your ISSU, but certainly can take play when you have a catastrophic failure within your stateful switchover pair.
Exactly. Okay. So then it would be a matter of then upgrading that controller, the N+1 controller,
Oh, great point.
to make
Yes,
sure that it's in line with the new version on the HA pair then.
absolutely. You want to make sure that all your controllers are running the exact same
Yeah.
version. Otherwise, when APs join that controller, they will have to download
Yeah.
the software that's running on your N+1, and that it really lengthens the time
Yes.
that AP can get back up and running. Great
Correct.
point.
Thanks.
Real quick, and we're about to wrap up here. Hopefully, I know it's really quick, but there is really a really simple way through the GUI to initiate your ISSU upgrade. And it really is a hands-on. All you're doing at that point, once you initiate it, is you're just monitoring the status to make sure things are flowing. I reiterate that if you want more, this is a really we're just skimming the surface here. So don't hesitate to reach out to your account team. And they know how to get a hold of us to coordinate a follow-up WebEx. And already highlighted, next episode is next Wednesday. So there's not 2 weeks from today, but next Wednesday at Cisco Live, we have a great team of folks that are going to be there and report to us live from Cisco Live, and I'm looking forward to that episode. And I will be on Slido to answer any of your questions. And with that, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you, Chip. That was great. Appreciate the episode here on ISSU. Great topic. I don't see any additional questions here in Slido, so it looks like we're good. So when you do close out, if you could complete the survey, we appreciate your feedback. You can always email us too at getunplugged@cisco.com with your feedback, with thoughts for what you'd like, topics you'd like to see on the show, questions like Chip had mentioned. If you don't know who your account team is, or you don't know how to get a hold of them or whatever, email us. You can also reach us on X, Twitter at unplugged 802.11 or 802.11, and then on threads at unplugged connectivity. So thank you everyone for watching. Thank you, Chip, for your time. Great episode, and look forward to seeing everyone next week live at Cisco Live and from Cisco Live here on Unplugged. So until next time, stay connected and unplugged.